Welcome back to By Sandlot. I'm Kyle Pagan, and as always, joined by Kyle Scott. Today, we're talking with Chris Klein, president of Hometown Soccer Holdings, about the new MLS Next Pro and KKR joint venture. We get into all of that. And we're also talking about youth sports goes to Washington again, as the PA State House is now passing a bill to separate private schools and public schools in their state playoffs. But before we get into that, you have a little bit of an announcement, a little tease I want to talk about with the premium community.
Yeah, let's call it a tease. We've talked about it on here before, right? But it was clear when I looked around the summit and saw the energy, the conversations that happened in that room. It was like, okay, how do we take this energy and extend it throughout the year, the other 364 days, digitally, right? In some ways, we do that with the newsletter and the podcast and our social feed. But I look at those things as a one-to-many platform. It's us talking to the audience. And there's a little back and forth there. And we certainly bring people in and we have interviews and things like that. But it's like, how do you do one-to-one? All right. So we're one-to-many. How do you do one-to-one or many-to-many, right? And we do have the premium community. We got a fair number of people in it now, but like fully candidly, it's mostly just been for these last 6 to 9 months, a few deep dive articles we've done, a little bit of extra data. There is and was a Slack group, but Slack was definitely not the right vehicle for this, especially once you reach a certain number of people. So we're thinking a lot about how do we bring the community together where operators can talk to operators and learn from each other. Operators and investors can talk to each other. Service providers can be in there, and everyone is served equally. And a big part of that is data. We've talked about this. So we'll roll that out in the coming weeks. But one of the things that became clear to us is that both at the event, the one bit of feedback we got is like, hey, consistent feedback is we wish more operators were here, right? That was both investors and service providers. We're like, hey, we want to learn from them. Hey, we may want to invest in them. And certainly there are potential clients. But like that's really the missing piece of the conversation. We had the big operators there, but we didn't have the long tail. There's thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. How do we get more of those people involved? And I think from a community aspect, listen, local, small, medium-sized business operators don't necessarily have the budgets to spend it's $500 to join our premium community for a year. So our thought is we're going to let a lot of these folks in for free, right? So they can interact with other operators, learn from each other, benchmarks themselves against their peers, right? Learn, hey, your companies that do X, Y, or Z have 40% higher revenue if you have streaming in your facility or if you offer less, whatever it is. So we'll add value there. And I think overall to the community, it's just a great opportunity to hear from the people actually touching the athletes. And our thing is like, you know what? We're not going to charge most operators. Anyone under, I think we're going to set it at $2 million in revenue is going to be able to join the community for free, get access to all of our premium content, all of the data and research. And our only ask for them will be to contribute to like a anonymized poll so we can learn about what they do, set some standards and benchmarks for the industry, which I think is valuable to everybody across the board. So that will roll out in the next week or two. But that's the big, I guess the big news there.
Yeah, definitely look out for that. I mean, we want to give back to the lifeblood of the youth sports industry. We wouldn't be here. The big service providers wouldn't be here. The big investors wouldn't be here all without our operators. So that's kind of what, and I'll give credit to Kyle. Kyle was the one who came up with that. So good job on that stuff. I'm really excited to get into that and kind of dig that out and see what we can do with the premium community. Cause that's one, just kind of keeping the goodwill of the event, keeping the energy of the event alive. We'll have like 3 or 4 events, maybe a year. And for the 360 days, you'll have a digital event going on.
Smaller events, one big one, some smaller. But yeah, I mean, listen, when you think about a conference, right? Some of it is what happens on stage, the panels we put together. But I would wager, and I saw this in our polling, that more than half of the interest and incentive for people to come to a conference, yes, they like sit through panels and hear thought leadership for sure. But a bigger piece is just networking, seeing their peers, and then, partnerships, opportunities, investments, acquisitions, they happen in those rooms. And it's like, how do we do that online? And the answer is like, well, it can't just always be us putting out content and people consuming it. Now we got to foster that, right? Like taking that energy in a physical space is different than in a digital space, but our goal is to foster it so the conversation is good, and then we're putting really premium stuff in there, data first and foremost, research reports only to the people who are willing to join the community. Either some people will pay, and for smaller operators, you get access at no cost.
Yeah, there's something for everybody, and don't think if you're an operator out there that you're just going to get spammed by investors or PE and stuff. There is, if you did attend an event, you'll understand this, but there is a peer-to-peer conversation where you have to accept the person to conversate with them and everything. So something for everybody.
Good communities having good guardrails, right? And so we'll moderate it, and that'll be our goals to make sure it's not a spam fest.
Yep. We also want to thank our sponsors who continue to power the show and allow us to show up in your podcast feeds and inboxes, including Event Connect, Go For, Playbook 365. Hey, we're going to start this episode off with an interview from Chris Klein, president of Hometown Soccer Holdings. We're going to talk more and peel back the layers of the MLS and KKR joint venture that was announced yesterday. So here's Chris. And all right, we're joined here by Chris Klein, president of Hometown Soccer Holdings, announced yesterday a joint venture between KKR and MLS Next Pro. Chris, could you just walk us through that partnership and talk to us about what some of the goals you both sides are hoping to get out of this?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited about the announcement. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Been interested in what you all are doing and excited to be with you. We're excited about the announcement, a partnership between KKR and MLS and the creation of Hometown Soccer Holdings with my partner, Tom Glick, and I. And what we want to do is we want to bring professional soccer that is affiliated with Major League Soccer to cities and communities around the country that don't yet have their own professional soccer team. MLS is our country's top league, and we have a league in MLS Next Pro that has the best young players and players that are transitioning from MLS academies into a second team and then through to a first team and then sometimes into European leagues. And we saw an opportunity to be able to commercialize that and to get stadiums built and to have an environment for the players to play in and to develop and for fans to come see and create a real fan experience in cities and communities across the country.
What does that experience, just for the people who aren't familiar, and I would largely include myself here on kind of Next Pro, what does that experience look like today for both players and fans?
I mean, today what it looks like is players are going from their MLS academies, and there are independent teams that are in MLS Next Pro as well. There's a team in Carolina, and there's going to be a new stadium in Grand Rapids. So there's independent teams as well, but the affiliated teams, players come through the academy up into Next Pro and then through to MLS. And today, largely the environment is playing at a training stadium or a college stadium that is near the MLS first team. There are a couple. Huntsville renovated Nashville's MLS Next Pro team. Huntsville City renovated a baseball stadium in Huntsville, and they have a great team and a great environment there connected to Nashville. FC Dallas has a new great stadium opening in Mansfield, Texas, that they're going to do the same thing that we're looking to do. And so we'll roll this out over a period of 5 to 7 years and be able to have all of the MLS affiliated clubs in new markets, in new stadiums.
How many new stadiums plan to get built?
I mean, we need a place for all of these teams to play. So currently 3 MLS teams do not have a Next Pro team, but the other 27 do. And so including Mansfield and Huntsville, there's 25 more that need a home for their MLS Next Pro team. And that's what Tom and myself and Hometown Soccer plan to do in partnership with MLS.
So is that I'm a little bit ignorant as to how this works, but does that just mean like going into these towns and municipalities and finding ways to get these things built one by one?
Yeah, it means finding the right partner and the right city and the right location that works for the MLS Next Pro Club. Very similar to minor league baseball, that you go into these communities and it works for Major League Baseball for player development. But there are cities and towns across the United States that want to have a professional team in their city to be able to root and cheer for, bring their kids to, have access to great professional soccer.
The difference between what obviously MLB and MLS here is that MLS is incentivized to train players from a young age through the academy level. There's the obvious nexus with youth sports, which is what we care about.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about how this maybe strengthens that pipeline, that ecosystem from the youth academies all the way up to the pro team, makes it, a bit more comprehensive, I guess.
Yeah, I mean there's incredible investment today from Major League Soccer into MLS academies. And they're training players, to your point, where there is a difference between soccer and every other sport is soccer teams and clubs are really incentivized to train their own players because they become assets. They become assets to them, and they're able to move them into their first team. They're also able to sell them on to Europe and to other leagues around the world. And our league is just starting to realize that investment, and we can create something that is not only great for the ecosystem and the pyramid of soccer in the United States and Canada, but that also works great for the player. I mean, players that get better training and can follow their professional path like they have for decades in Europe.
Won't ask you to speak for KKR, but they obviously have investments, or their hands in investments from the pro level, to the NBA down to youth, with platforms like league apps and varsity brands and things like that. Maybe just from your view, what do you kind of see as the overall opportunity? And I would say like the blurring of the lines around investment, and Next Pro sits right in the middle here, right? It's a pro league, but it's closely tied to the youth side. It's closely tied to the pro side. It feels like the lines in investment are blurring between pro and youth. Maybe give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's the opportunity to do this, and much like Diamond Baseball Holdings has done this in minor league baseball, a Major League Soccer team is really incentivized to commercialize their MLS team, and they're building new stadiums that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and to really focus on this part. And like you said, it really comes from the youth up through their first team. They are focused on player development. And so KKR, along with Hometown Soccer Holdings, saw the opportunity to be able to commercialize this and to be able to do it at scale, which really makes it worth the time and investment. And then it also, for the MLS clubs, it provides a better environment for their players. Playing in front of fans that really care about, they care about winning and losing. They care to get to know that player and see him go from, a young player in the academy and transition through MLS Next Pro and then ultimately into a first team. People love those stories, and they want to associate themselves with it and watch and be attached to it.
We talk a lot about the tailwinds that are coming with. Obviously, I know you're sitting on the chair of the FIFA committee out there in LA for 2026. The tailwinds of the World Cup coming now with this investment in MLS Next Pro and building out youth communities and everything. I just wanted to know kind of about the operating model. Like MLS clubs, they're keeping the soccer ops while you guys are running the business side. How did you decide kind of where that line was, and why'd you decide that way?
The line became very clear because MLS clubs, what is really important to them is having players that can play for their first team, and they're already spending, hundreds of millions of dollars to develop these incredible soccer players in their academy, and they weren't yet commercializing it. It became a bandwidth thing, and so that line was very clear, not only to us, but to our partners at MLS, of this is something that's important to us, and this is something that myself and my partner and our team have a really deep history doing, and so I think that the two came together, and which makes us just really such a strong partnership that we have with Major League Soccer, to be able to come alongside to what they've already built, to what they're already doing, into a system that's working really, really well. to be able to make it better.
What are you guys seeing on the demand side, maybe with the World Cup coming up, especially in terms of fan interest, right? The ability for these towns to support, I think I read like 5 to 6,000 seat stadiums, if I read that right. And then maybe just from the player and participation side, right? How much does this give MLS Next Pro and Next maybe a leg up on some of the other pathways out there? Because it's not the only game in town, but it's certainly one of the bigger ones.
The World Cup coming in 26. Look, I come from a generation that was able to capitalize on the 1994 World Cup, and when it came here, we had no professional league, and that was the launch of Major League Soccer right after the 94 World Cup and in 1996, and that created the professional game in the United States. And here we are in 2026, and we're seeing a completely different dynamic. That MLS is here to stay. And so I think what we're seeing is we'll get the tailwinds of a World Cup with a soccer nation that's already here. And so I think from a participation standpoint, soccer has grown incredibly. And I think it will really not only solidify, but enhance what is already here and being able to tell the story in a new and different way. You're going to have players that are on our national team that have come up through MLS academies, have played Next Pro into MLS and either on to Europe or still playing here now. And so to be able to tell those stories in a new and different way, like they've always done. I mean, you had how many people watch the NFL draft because they're interested in these athletes that are developing in college and going on to play in the NFL. We see a world where the interest is the same as it is across the world for soccer.
You guys are going to streamline, it seems like, sponsorship. When we talk about sponsorship, a lot of times it comes from like subsidizing registration fees or team stuff. It'll be a lot different, but we see opportunities like Rush Soccer slaps a logo on, a jersey. Now 60,000 kids are wearing that jersey. I think you guys, if I read correctly, you're streamlining the sponsorships under the 30 teams now. So if you could just talk about, the untapped revenue system and then, how you guys think of sponsorships up there.
Yeah, look, sports is not a complicated business. I mean, our revenue streams are going to be tickets, sponsorship, food and beverage, merch, being able to create new and different brands in these cities that, that they're really proud of, that they can put the hat and the T-shirt on and be able to have. And then other events, we're going to have these stadiums that are going to be great assets for these communities that can not only have, soccer, but really anything else that can be played in a rectangle. And you all are in this world, and really the expansion of all of these other sports, whether it be rugby or lacrosse, flag football, all of these other events that could be played in these assets that are going to be in these new cities. We're going to be at the center of trying to bring those and have great partners that are going to be able to showcase their sport in a new and different way than you saw, I mean, even 2 to 3 years ago, some of these sports and their expansion and what you're starting to see. So that'll be at the center of what we're doing. I think the other part about that's just really interesting, in your world, in a world that is very much pay to play, and parents are spending a great deal of money to try and train their son or daughter to be able to either go to college or be a professional. MLS is already subsidizing that for these players, from kids that are as young as 8 all the way up into the professional ranks. So to be able to come alongside them and enhance that experience for these players is something that's become really interesting. And there are new clubs like San Diego FC that have an incredible academy, not only building, but infrastructure that they have and what they've built to be able to train these kids from a young age, to be able to move them up through their system and ultimately have them debut for their professional team.
I know we're 24 hours into this news breaking and stuff, but like I know you guys are going to be on the 6,000 to 8,000 stadiums. You're going to be involved in that. So again, like Kyle said, I don't want you to have to speak for KKR, but when you're thinking about these new stadiums and everything, is things like infrastructure, streaming, are those things on the table currently when you're talking about like youth tournament potential?
Yeah, you mean being able
Showcase
to
the game
showcase
streaming.
the
Yeah,
game
yeah.
streaming that way?
Okay.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mention a lot of these cities have youth complexes that are attached to them. So we not only want this to be something where we can showcase our athletes, but being able to have the final of a lacrosse tournament, a soccer tournament that's attached to it. We are talking to streaming partners. Major League Soccer has a partnership with Apple. But to be able to tap into some of these other youth markets, I mean, I can watch my nieces and nephews play youth sports, from my living room in Oklahoma, which I couldn't do before. And so being able to understand and promote some of these other sports and showcase them in a new and different way in partnership with people that are already doing this today.
Yeah, it feels like in so many ways these venues are potentially right sized for that. They're it's single digit thousand seats, pro quality venue. We see so many of these monstrous facilities that are built around participation, but the spectator angle of that is kind of an afterthought. So this feels like a sweet spot. And you mentioned something really interesting a second ago. It seems like you talked about the MLS subsidizing some of the participation around soccer because it's worth them investing in players. But it feels like if you increase the commercial opportunity here, kind of at the quote unquote minor league level with Next Pro, it only further incentivizes the MLS as a whole to be, investing in youth development because there's more opportunities to monetize, even if a guy doesn't, go on to play for the union proper team.
Yeah, I mean, and you're exactly right. Expanding that the pie and being able to prove out the model, so that these owners who are investing great sums of money to develop players, and it's not completely altruistic. I mean, these players do have value, and you're able to create an opportunity for young players, but also to be able to monetize it to go reinvest in your team and your club, and so keeping that inside of the ecosystem. It's something that the owners are really excited to do. They've been doing it for 10 years, and we're really now starting to see players that are cycling through that are earning opportunities to play for our national team and for European clubs and in Major League Soccer. And being able to really tell a story of a player that came from the community where they're playing in, and then makes it on the first team is, I think, something that's really unique about soccer.
Awesome. Last one, what's the next step? So where do you guys what's next? I saw it's take a few years to roll out, but it feels
It will
like
take a few years
quite
to
the
roll out.
undertaking.
Yeah, but I mean, we have a couple stadiums in development, so we're going to be excited to make a couple of announcements here over the next couple months, prior and after the World Cup, and really take advantage of that, and then engage in communities with our partners at MLS to be able to find the right spot for these teams over the next, like I said, 5 to 10 years.
All right. A lot of layers to this deal. I think we learned about a lot more. I would say, Kyle, youth aspects to the deal that I think we thought about. It was good that Chris kind of dialed in on those topics. We got stuff like they're building stadiums, 6,000 to 8,000 seat stadiums that will also have multi-purpose. Seems like there might be some entertainment districts around there, or definitely be some field tournaments around there, some infrastructure going on, and then just kind of, about the whole long-term vision. What'd you gain from that?
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway. And I mean, I think obviously did an amazing job of explaining it. And this isn't directly a youth sports play. So I'm always mindful when we have those conversations is like, hey, I don't want to contort somebody into like, what does this mean for youth? I mean, they're doing something, that is basically a minor league, more professionalized minor league for MLS soccer. But we're looking at it through the lens of sports. And it's clear if you're building 20 some, I mean, it's crazy undertaking here, right? But you're building 20 some stadiums in kind of mid-sized towns throughout the country. Well, you're going to fill them with things other than soccer games. And certainly, flag tournaments, things like that. You were at the Unrivaled thing down in Florida, right? It's, one of those venues feels like perfectly right-sized for that stuff. So that's one aspect of it. The thing we didn't get into, but that I kind of view, I want to tee up something you and I think pretty accurately, that we had no prior knowledge here, but pretty accurately theorized about just a couple of months ago. Somewhere I would imagine in the middle and late stages is somebody being truly vertically integrated in sports, where you own the pro team, you own the local real estate. There's a youth component to that. You're hosting tournaments, you have youth tech. Like all of this stuff eventually just fits together. It's going to be messy for a long time, but I think any massive investment in sports winds up at some point being involved in youth, high school, and scholastic, because it's just one giant pipeline at this point.
You know who might be very well positioned for that is the MLS. Philadelphia Union, Union 1, Union 2, Union grassroots and all that stuff. Like they are kind of building the model that I think a lot of people are probably going to cherry pick off of in a couple years. Nailed it.
Pretty good. Pretty good with the Union.
Not to pat ourselves on the back. We're humble reporters here.
So the backstory of that is you sent me the transcript and I thought I had said the Union thing. And I was like, wow, this was actually pretty smart. And then I saw it was your name. I was like,
dude, that if you see that clip, it's just I'm Tyrese Halliburton on the gold medal USA team. I'm just piggybacking off your take.
Wide open three, but you nailed it, right? You nailed it. No, that was. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We weren't necessarily describing exactly this, but I think super directionally accurate. What I'm seeing, so look at KKR, right? They have Arctos under their umbrella, which has stakes in NBA and pro teams, and then you got league apps, varsity brands, Play On. I'm probably forgetting a couple of others, and now MLS Next Pro, which really sits right in the middle between pro and youth. And I think the point we were trying to make there, there's two of them really. One is that the lines are blurring between youth and pro sports, and that's what we were talking about. If anyone is thinking about investing in just youth sports or just pro leagues, if you look at it over the long term and you think about the money that's coming in and sports being an institutional class investment, at least at the pro level and increasingly now at the youth level, you're going to see consolidation happen. It's happening horizontally in each layer, but you're going to see it happen vertically between the two. And you correctly just hopped in there and said, well, MLS feels like the best spot for this because you don't have this disintermediating thing of the NFL draft or the NBA draft that disincentivizes pro teams to invest all the way down to the youth level. So it's no surprise that MLS is, the investment from KKR, kind of is in the bridge between pro and youth is MLS. That makes a lot of sense. The second part of that is at our conference, Matt Mueller from Huddle called sports the $2.7 trillion market. And here, everybody else on the stage is talking about projects, plays, undercounted, $40 billion youth sports market. Jeremy Goldberg, by the way, League Apps, the investment from KKR, KKR, right? So he calls it an $80 billion market. And then Matt is over here at the end, like, who's the guy in Jaws who just stuck his fingers on the chalkboard and stood up in the back? I'm sure you didn't see Jaws.
Never saw it.
No. Famous scene. I forget the guy's name. He scratches the chalkboard and he's like, I'll catch the shark, right? So Mueller hops in and he's like, sports is a $2.7 trillion global market. That's how Huddle's thinking about it, right? They're angling it going public. They're not looking at just youth. Youth is a piece of it. Now, they're a tech company, a little bit different. So you think about the way Huddle thinks about it, not youth, trillion. How KKR is thinking about it, right? The investments from pro all the way down to league side, or league apps, excuse me. And then even Fast Break. I think when we had John on the other day, we talked mostly about youth sports, but obviously they have relationships with the NBA and pro leagues for scheduling. He talked about an NGB overseas to be named. So I think the players who were thinking really big from both investment and larger operators and tech companies are really thinking about sports as one giant integrated opportunity. And to me, this KKR investment, MLS Next Pro, is just a great example of how 10 years from now, there's going to be very little distinguishing those things. And Next Pro just feels like it sits right in the middle there, because it's going to be stadiums for, minor league teams, but you're probably going to fill these things often, I would wager, with amateur, high school, and youth tournaments. And, super desirable because there's going to be other development around them. And there's going to be spectator and fan creature comforts that maybe a lot of tournament venues don't always have. So yeah, just like it's all coalescing, I guess.
I mean, how many facilities do we see that are sprouting up in mid-markets? I mean, if you go to the newsletter today, I think James might have talked about 5 of them. That's my marketing brain immediately goes to the facilities piece because I love synergies, and there are so many synergies with the KKR stuff. I mean, field tournaments we talked about. I think they might have a little bit of a stake in Unrivaled, so that's flag right there. Baseball, whatever they're building around there. But then you outfit them with the streaming. They got Play On, Max Preps there. They got GoFan for the ticketing, Soccer.com, which they recently purchased. Sell the Soccer.com merch in the in the facilities and everything, varsity brands, cheerleading tournaments. I mean, this is just synergies, crazy synergy.
Yeah, and I would. He brought up one thing that I hadn't been thinking about, but it makes a lot of sense. And I wish other sports had the incentives to do this, but the draft and like the fact that you can't invest in players down to the youth level. I mean, you can, but it's usually like these. I don't say token, but it's these philanthropic community investments from pro teams. Hey, we build a field so kids can play. Okay, cool. But they don't care about, the Phillies don't care about developing the kid from Philadelphia because if he's great, he's going to enter the draft. And now you've socialized their development, right? It's socialism for sports development, right? You pay and then, somebody else gets the benefits, right? I wish there was that model, but because the MLS has that model, as Chris was saying, they're able to invest in athletes and they're able to subsidize some of that cost because if one of those kids pays off, that's a star on your team. And I think by adding more commercial opportunities at that minor league level with Next Pro, now it just only incentivizes them, and having a holding company that kind of runs it all and thinks about sponsorship and bringing in other dollars the way a pro club would, it just further incentivizes them to develop and subsidize younger players and hopefully keep costs down. And he said, it's not always altruistic. It's about, hey, this could be really good for the club. I mean, this is like a capitalism versus socialism debate, right? It doesn't have to be altruistic, right? If you have a financial incentive to drive a good outcome, it actually can drive costs down for participating youth soccer players. I think when people think about it as it always has to be philanthropy, you get what pro teams do now in other sports, which is, yeah, we'll build a field, but we're not investing in any athlete, right? Great. I just think it's great because it opens up more commercial opportunities and more incentive. And if other leagues were to find a mechanism that they could do that, and maybe the SEC is like the best position to do this, it's more or less pro sports at this point. If they tie up with academies, there is no draft to enter college sports, right? You can develop a player from age 8. And then if he comes up, part of the deal is like he plays for your school. So you could see this happening. It would be great if MLB and NHL, or something had these pathways to do that, but different conversation for a different day, I guess.
Let us right into the great example because we're local to it. Kevin Sullivan is on the Union, 14 years old. He signs with the Union. 18, he'll be moving over to Manchester City for a nice little chunk of change that goes back to the Union. So that's a perfect example.
They're compensated if he goes elsewhere. Yep.
Yeah. So
good stuff from Chris. That was good.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about NHL, though. I think NHL would be prime for this. Academy's huge in NHL. The NHL draft, not really a spectacle. The NCAA doesn't really, I think they make I think the leading teams make $5 million a year on college hockey teams that are bringing in revenue. So like this one, I feel like would be a no-brainer for the NHL to kind of that. Flyers. How many U Snyder hockey teams do the Flyers have?
That's a great example. The Snyder Hockey is very much a philanthropic effort, and they do a great job. They invest in rinks. One of my buddies has been instrumental in that, actually locally here in Philly. But again, it's about doing what right by the community. But then they have the Flyers junior hockey clubs. But if those kids who go through there, then just get dispersed into the ether when they're out. There's no incentive for the team to, really invest in those top players. NBA is probably maybe even a better example. I mean, there's chaos at the youth level of all sports. But a single player, more than any other sport in basketball, can just make or break a franchise, right? Hockey, it's 25 guys. You can't make as much of an impact. Baseball, trickier, certainly football. NBA, though, if you develop a kid from age 8, right, and he goes through your system and you have an exception to be able to sign him rather than him entering the draft, like that could change the course of a franchise. Imagine the investment. Again, so many other inputs go into this not being a reality that I don't want to get over our heads. But
just to tie a bow on that, though, there's chaos in the NBA right now with the tanking. They can't figure out the tanking. It's the biggest thorn in Adam Silver's side right now. It's the biggest thorn in the fan side right now. So, hey, they get rid of the draft one day. Maybe it'll be chaos, but hey, maybe they'll build a maybe they'll
You
build some
don't, you don't even
academies.
need the, yeah, I guess the point there is you don't even need to get rid of the draft, right? The MLS has a draft, but if you develop a player and he's with your academy, I think for more than a year, right, then you get the ability to get him. I mean, you could you could put lots of rules around this so teams aren't hoarding players and things like that. But there's certainly a way. It's like, hey, if you invested in the guy and you could prove it, then you get first dibs at him, and you still can keep a salary cap. You give an exception for that guy. I mean, totally different. Again, totally different combo. But you could see in the MLS. And there's still competition, right? There are, there's the alphabet soup of other soccer pathways. It's not like they own the whole thing, but they're kind of among the top tier of development systems is the MLS for that reason, because they have reason to be.
Yeah. One thing about this new joint venture, KKR and Hometown Holdings, they'll take on the business ops side, and the soccer teams will stick to obviously the coaching and development. I think that as this trickles down into youth sports more, and we expect it to, I just think that's such a winning message for PE. Hey, you guys focus on the development, focus on the coaching. We'll handle brands, we'll handle sponsorships, we'll handle the media, we'll handle the infrastructure. You guys go out there and you go develop athletes. I think that is a perfect winning message if you're out there.
That's it. That's the playbook.
So let's go over to the next one. More youth sports goes to Washington. The Pennsylvania House passes a bill to separate private and public schools in state championships, passed by a 178 to 23 vote, and it'll now go to the Senate. I mean, Stephen Weiler, I think, has came up in the last 5 episodes because he is just so locked in from that panel at the Buying Sandlot Summit. I mean, this is another one. I'll read a quote from him from the panel. When politicians are hearing it from their constituents about issues that there is a personal connectivity to, that's not something they're going to miss an opportunity on. This is one of the best examples of voters complaining to their reps and then policy being drawn up and passed to please them. This is also talking about your take on Monday being like, I think there are going to be a lot of conversations, a lot of debates between public schools versus private schools versus charter schools. We're seeing it play out in the Pennsylvania House right now. Sports.
A little bit, yeah. Youth sports goes to Harrisburg here, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd be interested for your take on kind of why separating public and private tournaments, because I know you got thoughts on that. And this is one of those things. It's not about cost. It's actually about competitive balance, right? The system is not fair because private schools can pull players from outside geographical boundaries, right? So it's it's nice to see competitive balance, kind of get brought up as something other than cost. My point the other day, maybe we have the clip here, but my point the other day was, frankly, it was different than this, but I was drawing the distinction between the arguments you're going to see around youth sports is going to very closely resemble the arguments you see around public school versus private school, or those concepts, right? And if you talk about how do you subsidize youth sports participation, you're going to have lots of people, and like just generally speaking on the left will say, hey, let's subsidize nonprofits and local communities to be able to stand up fields through public tax dollars. And on the other side of the fence is you'll largely on the right side, like the spatial right side of the fence. I'm not saying one side's correct or the other, but on the spatial right side of the fence, you're going to have to say, hey, private investment can do better here. And then you're going to have, what are the outcomes on kids who participate in the publicly backed leagues? And then what are the outcomes on the kids who participate in the privately backed clubs and leagues? And, to oversimplify things. And that's largely what happens in the public versus private school debate, right? You have some public schools that are really exceedingly well run. And then in general, you have private schools that are incentivized to, beat and clear the bar that many public schools do. So that was kind of my point, but it is funny to see like 2 days later, a headline come up where you're quite literally separating public and private schools when it comes to sports. So, there you go.
Yeah, I think there's good things and bad things about it. I think football, this is more people are watching it coming from private school and coming from one of the best leagues in the country, the Philadelphia Catholic League. I think winning the Catholic League is like the gold standard. And if you get the state and you win the state title, that's just like a cherry on top. In football, state, it's like all about winning state. You want to win state, you want to win state. So I think that's different parameters. But in terms of just like kind of public versus private, I kind of like it because they're not raw. I mean, all our private schools, the Philadelphia Catholic League, at least on my end, they all recruit. They recruit kids from New Jersey. They recruit kids from different neighborhoods. Public schools can't do that. If you're in the certain, district, you're in the certain zone, you got to go to that public school. There's no one who is going out of their way to go pay for public school in the state of Pennsylvania, to go play for a basketball team. They might as well just go to either they'll go to the Interact where you went to high school, play for Malvern or play for Prep Charter, or they'll go to one of the Catholic schools.
I love you just sticking Prep Charter together, like two schools together.
Yeah, I know, Penn Charter and St. Joe's Prep, whatever it was. But I don't. The one reason I would push back on is the last thing we need is more fragmentation in this damn youth sports industry. And then on the other end, the private schools own the state championships. If you go down the list of the last 10 years of state championships, I would say probably 70% are run by the private schools. This now, if we are separating it, it does give public school kids more exposure, and I think more exposure gets them, potentially paid in the long run.
Interesting. Yeah, and not to not to strain yet another analogy, but we were just talking about it, right? Like the draft in pro sports is kind of the great equalizer. If you were looking at like public high schools here, the great equalizer is like luck of the draw and who's in your district boundaries, right? Whereas the private schools can, go out and recruit more akin to maybe, I don't know what the MLS could do, where you can kind of get rights to a player and pick your squad.
The transfer portal is actually a good thing.
Randomness. Yeah.
Because if you find a good kid in the public league, here comes Newman Goretti to poach him over to, now he's going to school there.
Right. Yeah. So it makes sense from a competitive balance standpoint, but at the same time, you also have, a lot of these schools are in certain communities, and like the kids who go to one private school and the public school down the street, like frankly should be playing each other a lot of times. But yeah, it's an interesting debate. I know some states have already done this, some haven't. Do you think it has anything to do with like maybe the relevance of scholastic? Again, I get over my head on this one, but the relevance of scholastic participation in this day and age with kind of club and elite circuits, like, is there any there that like, you're trying to make these high school tournaments more relevant than the privatized or stuff that happens outside the school?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look at Nike EYBL versus AAU. If you're in the EYBL, you obviously have more exposure than your just local grassroots AAU. So I think a lot of people are going to start looking at this versus, and I think academies are going to get into this a lot more, being like, hey, what's public now versus private versus academy model and stuff. And it's like, where can I get the most exposure? I would say that's probably where this is going. And do I see kind of the PCL maybe being broken up, or just your good private schools in general for sports? Potentially, I think, as people are going to be watching this and see how this passes through.
You would have a better handle on this because you played, and my kids are certainly too young for this, but like from a basketball, let's just take basketball perspective. Are there kids who just aren't playing for their high school because they want to go play for the, like just play on the circuit and not worry about the high school? Or is like there's still enough allure to, be your senior point guard on your high school basketball team?
I would say it's definitely different from region. I would say in the Northeast, playing CYO, playing high school sports is like huge. I don't know how it is in the South. I don't know how it is out West and everything, but I would say it's still, I'm not as well versed in it, but I know unless you are a top 100 recruit and you want to go, transfer to, Oak Hill, or Montverde, like that's a different thing. But most of the top prospects, I would say, still play in that high school sports because it's one of the greatest conferences in the entire country. But they probably get more exposure in the summertime when they're playing on their AAU and stuff.
Yeah. I know James. I'm sure James. Next time we have James on, like we'll double click on this because he's talked a lot about IMG and some of the other big private schools just having to like form their own thing, because it becomes unwieldy at a certain point.
Yeah. It's funny to see though, man. It's funny to see us talk about something, then 2 days later we get to kind of circle back on it and everything. I mean, not to do another Weiler quote, but he was talking about it. It's like 75 million people are in youth sports and they're in high school sports, and that would make up the half of the voting block of last election. So the politicians will pay attention.
Yeah. And again, I mean, maybe if you just take like the high level macro thesis of everything is, it's over time, things become more leisurely for societies, right? And I think we've reached that point in our society where some of the most important things that lawmakers can be talking about are the cost or even the competition related to youth sports, right? Probably a laughable concept in the 1940s when we were in the middle of a war, right? Or in the 1960s, or almost any other time in history. So it is kind of like hey, at what stage of advancement is your society? Well, some of the most important things are public and private. People are concerning themselves with that at the public level. So these are what I would call like all of this show, what we do, first class problems.
Yeah. In 2010, in the 2010s, it was all about fracking. Now it's all about youth sports, baby. Except this one, it happens to be a bipartisan issue that both sides agree on.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about energy because we need it, right? So, yeah, frack away.
Yeah. So listen, they're just they're gonna see everything. All your politicians, all their campaign managers, they're gonna see what's going on locally in the youth sports space, and they're gonna latch onto it, and they're gonna give their takes on it. And it's not the last time we're gonna be talking about this, and it's cool.
Everyone knows this too, but if anyone in the space knows it, I think Jeremy Goldberg talked about on the panel. People, you go to a party, people know what you do, and that's all, like, they just light up. I'm finding the same thing. That was like, I do something in youth sports, and like you talk to anybody with kids, and it's like, the eyes light up, and everyone's got a thought on it. It's wild, so that manifests itself through public officials eventually. Everyone, for every 10 people who have a thought, one person's writing a letter.
Yeah,
to their local congressman.
100%. Yeah, this passed with flying colors in the House, so we'll see what the Senate does, and we'll report back. But I think that's everything for today. Thanks to Chris who came on, turned that around really quickly. Thank you to you, the listener. We will talk to you next week. You have a great weekend. GG's.
Good game.